Hello, welcome, Marlene here. Today we're going to have an in-depth conversation about royal icing. I'm going to show you how I do it, and then we're going to decorate a cookie. Now on to today's tutorial. Let's talk about why royal icing to decorate cookies, as opposed to, say, buttercream, which is much more tasty. Well, it's because of the finish that you can achieve. If you can see here, it almost looks like it's not food, like it's plastic. It gives you such a smooth finish. Here, this is not painted. This is, 3 colors of icing combined while the icing is wet and it becomes completely smooth. Now, the other thing is it dries. Here, I can touch it. It's completely dry. I can wrap this in a bag. It's not going to damage the decoration. And it has a very good shelf life. If kept out of the sun, you can save these. Obviously, you can't eat them after they've been sitting on the shelf for several months, but they can be saved as souvenirs. So royal icing is really a very versatile decorating option, but it isn't that tasty and the texture can be quite hard. If we break this cookie, the icing breaks a little bit like, it snaps. It is hard. You can see here it's not a thick amount of icing, but it is, hard. And if you think about what's in there, it's not something that's particularly delicious. It's water, meringue powder that doesn't offer any flavor benefits, and powdered sugar, pure sugar. And so these 3 ingredients don't really make for something that's very good tasting. And so it's more of an aesthetic kind of a thing. You can add flavoring to the icing if you want. I personally add lemon juice. You have to be careful of what you do add to the royal icing. It can sometimes alter the drying of the icing. It can cause splotching. And so, don't add anything with oils in there. For example, orange flavoring has oil in it and the icing doesn't dry well. Whereas the lemon juice, I'm sure orange juice would be fine, but the orange has like the essence of the skin or something and there's an oil in it. And so now I'm going to show you how to make royal icing. You can certainly do this in your KitchenAid stand mixer, but for the purpose of this video, I want you guys to really see what I'm doing, and so I'm using my hand mixer. I actually always make my royal icing with a hand mixer. In this bowl, I have half a cup of water, 3 tablespoons of meringue powder, and I'll be adding a total of 775 grams of powdered sugar. You may want to add a little bit more or less. You don't want to just dump it all in. You're going to look at your icing as you move along in the mixing process. I don't usually mix the water and the meringue powder. I just kind of leave it like that, and then I add my powdered sugar. When I make my icing, I measure the water and I measure the meringue powder, but I do not measure the powdered sugar. And so I just kind of pour it in and I mix and add more if I need to. And so I'm adding about half the bag. This is a 1 kilogram bag to my water mixture. And now I'm combining all this together. Let's look at this icing. This is way, 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 way too runny. I need to add more, and so I'm just putting a little bit more in there, and I will mix again. Now, if you look at it, it's getting a bit better, but it's still way too runny. I want peaks in my icing. I'm actually going to add a smidgen more. I just find it's a little bit too loose for how I usually do it. Now let's look at this icing right here. Okay, I'm going to just mix it so you can see what's happening. You see the kind of rippling that we're getting? That means the icing is the correct consistency. You see as I pull my mixer, you can see that rippling. That's what I want to see in my icing. Once you've got your icing at this point, if you're creating ruffles on your cookie, you're just going to take an amount out and whip it a little bit longer to get some air, activate the egg whites, and then you'll be able to use that to create your ruffles on your cookie or on your design. I don't often do that, and so at this point now I'm going to be adding the lemon juice. The only thing that really adds any flavor to this concoction is lemon juice. You can add what you want. Personally, I find the lemon juice kind of cuts the sweetness of this. You know, this is pure sugar in there. The lemon juice kind of helps a little bit with regards to that. It adds a little bit of a tang. Goes well with the sugar cookie. Not so well, however, with a chocolate cookie. Personally, don't really care for the combination with a chocolate cookie. And so now we're going to actually add lemon juice to create a more kind of piping consistency. So I'm just adding that. And now you see it's still holding the shape of it right there. So I'm just going to add a little bit more. So this will be good for piping the outline of the cookie. So you can spoon some of this out into another bowl for your piping icing. If you've ever looked at cookie decorating tutorials and royal icing, you will perhaps have seen something regarding seconds, time for icing. What does that mean? Well, the seconds refer to how long it takes for the icing, when you make kind of peaks in it, how long it takes for the icing to heal, to become flat again, to give that kind of, you know, really smooth, almost plastic finish on the top. Now this icing is too thick, you see? Now icing doesn't have to be super stiff for it to hold its shape. You see, now it's not holding peaks, but it's perfect to pipe. It won't kill your arm piping with this consistency, but it won't really heal well in the bowl when you're actually flooding the cookie. Some people separate the icing at this point and color it all in the different. I like to get the flood consistency for my batch and then I color the icing. So I'm going to add the lemon juice to this, and you can use your mixer, but I find you can see what's happening, especially if you're a beginner. If you do it with a spatula, you can see the icing. You see it's still holding. You want this not soup. You don't want it to be water, but you need it to heal. You want this to really, it's called flow icing. You want it to flow. You want it to be able to go with gravity and smooth out on the surface of the cookie. So you can see it here. It still has some body. It's not water. But if I shake it, here, let's give this bowl a shake. You see, the icing is smoothing out. I'm still left with a little bit on top. Just going to add a little bit. Let's count it out here. 1. Now I have my icing at 20 seconds almost exactly. And if I kind of, you know, create a peak in my icing and I count to 20, the icing will smooth out on the surface. It'll get nice and smooth. However, now what's happened is there's a lot of air trapped in my icing. I'm going to have air bubbles when I pipe the cookie, when I flood the cookie. Now, of course, I can be there with a needle and punching every hole. If you want, though, if you have the time, you can kind of leave it on the counter and let the bubbles kind of naturally come to the surface of the icing so that some of them can escape, so that when you decorate your cookies, that is a little bit less of an issue. Now you can separate this icing into different bowls to create your colors. Obviously, judge how much color you need for each. You don't want to make, you know, if you only need a little bit of, let's say, yellow, you don't want to make the same amount for every color. So gauge that out, and you can mix the colors now. A thing that can be tricky is if you don't say, let's say you run out of icing, you don't make enough. well, sometimes you won't have an exact color match. If you're using color right out of the bottle, that is less of a problem, but if you're making combinations, that can be tricky. And so now I'm just going to put a little bit of this icing in another bowl to color it. Something very important to note with regards to royal icing: if you leave it open like this, the surface will dry and the whole bowl will dry. Royal icing dries quite quickly, and so make sure that your unused icing, the icing that you're not addressing, like working on right then, is covered up, or when you go back to it, you're going to have a really dry layer on top. Some people use saran wrap, some people will soak a dish towel, kind of take out the excess water, a damp dish towel on top of the bowl. That's great too, to keep the surface from crusting. And now I'm going to add some color to this. Mixing colors can be a little bit tricky, since not all color react the same way. For example, making red and black icing, you need to add a considerable amount of food gel, so much so that it often even impacts the taste of your icing. Whereas other colors such as yellow and blue, you don't have to add as much of the gel to get a deep, nice color. And so you really have to kind of, practice that and get to learn which color is easier to mix. This is called Delphinium Blue. This is by Wilton, this particular color. I have my preferences, color preferences by brand. This is one of my favorite colors to work on when working with silver. And I don't have to add a lot to get a nice color with this particular shade of gel. And we just mix it until we have no more streaks and no more kind of lumps of the color. Another thing to note is that lemon juice, the acid in the lemon juice can actually impact your colors. And so if you're really finicky about that, you might want to think about that before you add the lemon juice. For me, it's a no-brainer. The lemon juice adds so much positive flavor that I deal with the colors. For me, I just put the lemon juice in, and whatever color comes out, I work with that. I do not want the cookie without that lemon juice flavor. For me, I find it really unpleasant. It's not good. It's pretty, but it's just really not a good taste. And there we go. There's my icing. And if you give it a little bit of you see here, you can see it healing. And another trick is you can give a shake. You see, there's the surface smoothing out, but I can see it still has lots of air bubbles. So I'm going to let it sit for a bit before I play with it. Here you can see the magic of royal icing. You see this nice smooth surface. And I'm going to show you what I did. Here is my cookie. And I've got a tipless bag, and I'm starting here by outlining the outer perimeter. I'm working in the same icing to outline and flood. So this is called the dam here. And now I'm flooding the inside. My icing, however, is not that flood per se. Flood would mean that it's very soupy and would just kind of go everywhere and need that outer line. I don't like to work in that consistency. I find that your finished cookie doesn't look as nice. It really kind of shellacks the cookie. It really doesn't have body, the icing, anymore. So it's not like above the cookie. I don't know how to kind of really explain what I mean, but it's really like varnished on as opposed to added on. Here you can see there's like you see that? That's a piece of food color that's not well combined. I'm going to swirl it around to kind of save this. Let's give our cookie a shake to heal everything up. Now, sometimes this would be an issue, but in the particular design that I'm doing, it's not an issue, so I'm not even going to stress it. Just shake your cookie until the surface is nice and smooth. I can actually see the line here that's created by that speck of food gel that didn't get mixed in well. If you have any questions following this video, be sure to put them in the comments sections. I'll do my best to answer all of you. Thanks so much for watching. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss any future uploads, and I'll see you next time.